You're buying tomatoes in January because someone convinced you winter means scarcity. Meanwhile, there's a community in Pennsylvania pulling fresh carrots from underground storage, harvesting kale through snow, and eating potatoes that have been alive since October. No heated greenhouses, no electric fans, no app controlling humidity, just dirt, wood, and a system designed to make food outlast the season that grew it. Here's the part that matters right now. They're not fighting winter. They're using it. The cold becomes part of the preservation system. The frozen ground becomes the thermostat. What you've been taught is a problem. They turned into infrastructure, and the entire operation runs on about $200 worth of lumber and salvaged glass. If you're tired of hearing why things can't work and want to see how things actually do work, subscribe now. This channel is built for that. Most people think year-round food means year-round heat. That's the trap. Mennonite growers don't try to recreate summer in December. They extend fall until March and start spring in February. The gap between those two windows is about 6 weeks. Everything else is managed harvest, not active growth, which means the expensive part, keeping plants warm enough to grow fast, almost disappears. The core method is cold frame production, not greenhouses. Frames. These are low wooden boxes, maybe 18 inches tall, covered with old windows or clear plastic. They sit partially underground. During the day, sun hits the glass. Heat transfers into the soil. Soil is dense. It holds energy. At night, when air temperature drops to 15 degrees, the ground under that frame is still sitting at 40. That's enough to keep greens alive, not thriving, alive, which is all you need if you're eating them, not selling them for appearance. Here's where it gets strange. They don't heat these frames. They don't vent them electronically. They prop the glass. Open with a stick during the day if it's sunny. They close it at dusk. The entire climate control system is a human being walking past twice a day. No sensors, no automation, no failure points. It works because the design assumes inconsistency. It's built for someone who might forget. That's the opposite of modern agriculture, which assumes perfection and collapses when you miss a setting. The crops inside these frames aren't the ones you see at the grocery store. They're not trying to grow beefsteak tomatoes in January. They're growing mache, claytonia, spinach, kale, and winter-density lettuce. These are cold-tolerant varieties that were selected over centuries because they survive, not because they photograph well. Most of them taste better after frost. The cell structure changes. Sugars concentrate. A leaf of kale pulled from under snow in February has more flavor than anything grown in July. But you'd never know that because the commercial system deleted these varieties. They don't ship. They don't store under fluorescent lights. They just taste better and grow when nothing else will. Now add root cellars. This is where people misunderstand what growing year-round actually means. Mennonites aren't producing new carrots in January. They're keeping October's carrots alive until March. There's a difference. A root cellar is an underground room, usually built into a hillside, holding steady at 34 to 40 degrees with 90% humidity. You pack it with root vegetables still covered in dirt, potatoes, beets, turnips, carrots, cabbages, apples in ventilated crates. These vegetables aren't frozen. They're not canned. They're respirating, still alive, burning energy so slowly that a potato harvested in September is still firm in February. You're not storing food. You're slowing down its life cycle until you need it. The dirt around the roots maintains moisture balance. The cool air prevents sprouting. The darkness stops photosynthesis. It's a controlled hibernation. Your refrigerator tries to do this and fails because it's too cold and too dry. A root cellar is alive. A refrigerator is a stasis chamber that degrades everything inside it. Comment where you're watching from, because this works very differently depending on where you live. The third piece is succession planting, but not the way most people do it. Conventional succession means planting lettuce every 2 weeks so you have continuous harvest. Mennonite succession means the second one crop comes out, another goes in. No rest period, no soil testing, no waiting for spring. If you pull potatoes in early October, you're planting garlic that afternoon. The bed never sits empty. This does two things. First, it maximizes production per square foot. Second, it keeps the soil biology active. Microbes don't go dormant when there's always a living root in the ground. That root keeps feeding the fungal network. Then to the A. System stays warm even when the air doesn't. Most people rest their soil in winter because they've been told soil needs rest. Soil doesn't need rest. Soil needs roots. The biology that makes soil fertile only exists when plants are feeding it. When you leave beds bare from November to March, you're not resting the system, you're starving it. Mennonites understood this before soil science confirmed it. They just knew that ground left empty grew weeds in spring and ground kept planted grew food. Here's the economic conflict. The entire greenhouse industry exists because someone decided winter production requires external energy, heating, supplemental light, ventilation. That's thousands of dollars in infrastructure and hundreds in monthly costs. It created an entire supply chain. Manufacturers, installers, energy providers, maintenance contracts. Now you're not a grower, you're a customer. The Mennonite approach eliminates that dependency. A cold frame built from reclaimed lumber and old windows costs about $30. No electricity, no subscription, no technical support, which means no recurring revenue for anyone. The USDA pushed controlled environment agriculture hard in the 1970s and 80s. Research funding, grants, extension programs. They described it as the future of food security. What they didn't say is that it locked growers into input costs. You can't run a modern greenhouse without buying fuel, parts, and expertise. A cold frame runs on physics. There's nothing to sell you once it's built. This isn't conspiracy. It's just business model alignment. Systems that generate dependency get funding. Systems that generate independence get called quaint. But here's what nobody mentions. Those expensive greenhouses fail constantly. Heating systems break in February. Ventilation fans seize. Thermostats drift. Algae clogs irrigation. You're one equipment failure away from losing everything. A cold frame has no parts to break. If the glass cracks, you replace it with another scavenged window. If the frame rots, you rebuild it with lumber you already have. The resilience isn't in the technology, it's in the absence of it. The crops that work in this system are specific. Not everything tolerates cold frame production. You're looking at brassicas, kale, collards, cabbage, broccoli rabe, roots, carrots, beets, turnips, parsnips, alliums, onions, leeks, garlic, hardy greens, spinach, mache, claytonia, arugula. Most of these are more nutritious than summer crops. Higher vitamin content, more minerals, denser flavor, but they're not commercially viable because they don't store well after harvest and they don't grow fast enough for industrial schedules. So they disappeared from seed catalogs. Mennonites kept them because they prioritized function over market appeal. Storage crops follow the same logic. You're not storing what's popular, you're storing what lasts. Cabbage stores better than lettuce. Beets store better than zucchini. Potatoes store better than tomatoes. Winter squash stores better than summer squash. These aren't the vegetables people crave. They're the vegetables that keep you alive when nothing else is available. That's a different priority structure. Modern food systems optimize for variety and convenience. Traditional systems optimize for security and durability. Now let's talk about replication. You don't need land in Pennsylvania. You need south-facing exposure and access to soil. A cold frame works in Minnesota, Montana, upstate New York, Vermont, anywhere with real winter. The colder the climate, the more essential it becomes. You're looking at a rectangle 4 feet by 8 feet, dug down 12 inches, framed with 2x10s, covered with old windows or polyfilm. Insulate the north side with straw bales if you want. That's optional. Plant in late August or early September. Let the crops establish before hard frost. Once snow hits, you're just managing the glass. Open it when sun is strong. Close it at dusk. Harvest as needed. Root cellar is harder but not complex. You need consistent cool temperature and high humidity. If you have a basement, you can partition off a corner, insulate it, add ventilation. If you have a hillside, you can dig in. If you have neither, you can bury a chest freezer, unplugged, and use it as a root clamp. Pack vegetables in damp sand or sawdust. Keep them dark. Keep them cold but not frozen. Check monthly for spoilage. Pull what's degrading. Eat it first. Succession planting just requires discipline. When you harvest, you plant. No delays. Keep a list of what goes in next. Garlic after potatoes. Spinach after tomatoes. Onions after beans. It's not complicated. It's just relentless. Most people fail because they rest when the season ends. The Mennonite framework doesn't acknowledge seasons as hard stops. It acknowledges temperature zones and plans around them. The constraint is light. You can manage temperature with mass and insulation. You can't add daylight, so winter production focuses on crops that tolerate low light. Greens, roots, alliums, things that grow slow and don't need 10 hours of sun. If you try to grow fruiting crops, peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, you'll fail. This system isn't about abundance, it's about continuity. Here's the real shift. You're not paying for year-round tomatoes. You're paying for the idea that seasons are obstacles instead of cycles. Mennonites didn't reject greenhouses because they're traditional. They rejected them because they're unnecessary. The food system taught you that winter means dependency. Cold frames teach you that winter means different crops, not no crops. Storage teaches you that harvest doesn't end when you pull the plant. Succession teaches you that soil works harder than you think. You're not adopting a lifestyle, you're recovering a logic that worked before it became unprofitable to sell. The next vault is already open.